Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's Microsoft Excel VBA video, we are going to see that what is a select case statement and what is its usage in Microsoft Excel VBA. Now, the first question is, what is a select case statement? So, a simple answer for it is a replacement for the if-else statements. In the previous video, we saw these if-else statements in which there was a bunch of conditions given to us, and according to that we wrote this much piece of code to execute those conditions. But with the help of the select case statements, this code could be drastically reduced. So that is the usage of the select case statement. It does the same work as the if else statements, and it does the same work in a very few lines of code. So in this video, we are going to see each and everything about the select case statement, what is its syntax, what is its usage, and everything with the help of an example. So the example that we have taken up is very simple. We are going to ask the user to input a number, and on the basis of that number, we are going to give the corresponding month name, which means the user is bound to enter the numbers between 1 to 12, and on the basis of the numbers entered, we are going to give an output. Like if the user has entered 4, we will give April as the output. If it has entered 7, we would give July as the output, and so on. So this is what we have taken up in mind, and this is exactly what we are going to do with the help of the select case statements. So let's start. On the left side of your screens, you can see that there is this Excel sheet open. Currently we are in sheet 4, and we are going to make some changes to it. So what I'm going to do is actually create a kind of a table in which there is a column called number, and the other column is titled as month name. I want the user to enter the number in the cell number B3, and in the corresponding cell, that is in cell C3, I want to display the month name. So let's just change it into a table. Just select these 4 cells and press Ctrl T, and actually make sure that you check on this My Table Has Headers column and click on OK. And then in the design tab, go to table style options and make sure that you uncheck this filter button. So this is the table that I have got, and if you want, you can just go to the home tab to apply the borders to this table. So this is the appearance that I like. You can change its appearance, but that's not our point of concern right now. So let's begin with our coding part. So for this purpose, what we are going to do is come back to our VBA editor. If you are not able to see that on your screen, you can go to your Excel sheet and press Alt F11 from your keyboard, and that would bring up this VBA editor. Now once your VBA editor is up and running, you can go to the Insert tab and insert a new module. In this module, we are first going to rename it to Select Case so that we are able to recognize that what this module is gonna do. Now what we are going to do is, in the code pane, we have to create a sub procedure, that is select cases or anything that you like, then open and close the parenthesis, and as soon as you press enter, VBA would automatically add end sub at the end, which means that Visual Basic recognizes this as a valid sub procedure. Now once it is added, what we are going to do is begin our coding. So first of all, we need to clear our thoughts on few things, and one of them is that whatever data we are trying to get from the user is going to be an integer data, because it is from 1 to 12, and that's the restriction we have imposed. But since the user is prone to make some errors, the user may also enter the textual data. So if we take a data or a variable to store that data, and if we specify its type as integer, and in case the user enters something that is non-integer value, if the user enters any text, then we will get a runtime error, which is not advisable, and we have to actually try to handle those errors. So in this case, what we are going to do is declare a variable without any data type, which means the variable will be of range data type, and whatever the data that the user enters would be valid for that particular variable. So let's create a variable with dim keyword dim v, and that's how we are going to create a variable. That's it. Okay, then in this variable v, we want to store the value, whatever the value we have of the cell B3. Okay, this is the value that we are going to store in this variable. So we just type v equals range, using the range function, and within parentheses and double quotes just write b3 dot value. So whatever the value of b3 is would be stored in the variable v. Now why we are storing it in the variable v? Because whenever we are trying to use the select case statements, we need to specify the place from where the select case statement must take the value, and it is always easier to use a variable. Instead of writing this whole statement, we can simply write v to represent it, and that's easier way of coding. Okay, now once we have done this, what would this piece of code do is whatever the value of b3 is there would be stored in v. Okay, now we want to access this value. So how can we access this? To access this, we need to use the select case statement, and the syntax is you need to write a bunch of keywords like select, put a space and write case, and then again put a space. Now after this, you need to write that particular variable whose value you want to use as the criteria, in this case v. Then as soon as you press enter, you can see that select and case both have been changed their colors to blue, which means that these are the reserved keywords and VBA recognizes them as such. Now what we are going to do is make sure to prevent any mistakes. We are just going to use this end select line. It is similar to the next in the for loop and end if in the if else conditions, which means that it marks the end of the select case statement. So we are just going to write it just now, and this means that we have defined this scope of the select case statement, that is whatever the statements lie between these two lines would be inside the scope of the select case statements. Okay, so that's the syntax for the select case statement, and now let us just specify the cases. Now these cases are nothing but the values or the conditions that must be met, or whatever cases you specify. Whenever that case is satisfied, the statements corresponding to that case would be executed. Okay, so how can you specify a case? First of all, a good programming practice is to use indents. So let's just use a tab to add some indents, and once you have added the indent, you can just use a simple case keyword, put a space, and then you are supposed to write the value with which you want to compare it. So since we are going with the months, so 1 to 12 is the possible values. That means we have to write 12 cases from 1 till 12. So first of all, I'm going to write a case 1, which means if the user enters the value of v as 1. Okay, then put a colon and then put a space. Now after this, you need to write whatever the statements you want to be executed if this condition is satisfied, that is if the value of v is 1. So what do I want to write? I want in the range or in the cell C3 to be shown that the number of the month that the user has entered is actually January. So I would be writing this piece of code, and when when in the cell B3 the user enters 1, JAN, that is short form for January, would be shown in the cell C3. That is meant by this code. So this is a simple one line. You can just copy paste it again and again. So I have written this all code, so just copy it and paste it over here. That's for the 12 case statements. Okay, you can actually double indent it as well. And there is one more thing, that is the case else statements, and this case else would be executed if there is no condition matching, like if the user enters 13 or the user enters a negative number or any other number or string data instead of for this, then what would happen? Then the select case statement would go to invalid. Okay, so that's how it works, and let's just try to run it. First of all, we would give a valid output, that is 8, and let's see what happens. We run it and we get AUG, that is August over here, which is perfectly fine. Now we are trying to try to give an invalid output, like I give 90 over here, and let's use the step into function this time to see how it works. We have got v it matches with each and every case. It doesn't actually satisfy any case, so it goes to case else, and in the case else the statement is here and that's executed. You get invalid as an output. Now the advantage over here is if we just try to write A, B, C, D, that's the output, or that's the input that the user has given. Now if we try to run it, we get nothing, which means invalid would be the output that we'll be getting. But if we would have just taken V as an integer, and in this case what would we get is a runtime error. That's why we have not bound V to any of the data types, and we have keeping it as a general, which means it would be treated as a range variable, so that if any other kind of the input we receive from a user, then also we get invalid as the output. So that is all for the select cases statements that you need to know in VBA. Thanks for watching.